Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Play your game. I'm your host, Tom Hannifan. Today, I'm joined by a great friend of the show for 5+ years now, StateCollege.com's Mike Poorman. Always has tremendous insight. You can check out his complete works on StateCollege.com. All you have to do is search Mike Poorman or Poorman. He is wealthy in spirit, and we appreciate you coming on. Mike, as boots on the ground in the borough, so much change, obviously, over the last handful of months with the Matt Campbell era beginning. Feels like things have quieted down now here in February. Winter workouts are getting underway. Media is having more access to Matt Campbell and his staff. Some of the staff at wide receiver position, for instance, wide receiver coach, still has to be figured out. So that's a fun little tidbit. But in terms of the local media accessibility to Matt Campbell and what you've learned so far, what have been your biggest takeaways?
He's been a really sincere, honest, I think forthright football guy. He's not a salesperson. My biggest takeaway with Matt Campbell is what other people, some of them who are inside the walls at Lash Building, what they say, and then what other student athletes say about the new football players. And the common theme is they're nice, they're genuine, they're real students, they're caring, and they're football people. But across the paradigm of everyone that I've talked to that interact much more on a daily basis, it's been positive and refreshing in that way, not as a slap to any other regimes, but, and I know Campbell is from Ohio, so he's Midwestern, and Iowa State is definitely Midwestern, but that's been my consistent what I've heard. And then there was a little media session with Campbell and just a few local people after he was introduced. Same thing. So that's been refreshing, authentic. I guess that's my last word, is there's an authenticity. In fact, I was with a buddy of mine going for a walk across campus in January, and Jordan Hill, great Penn Stater, former Seahawk, player development for Penn State, former terrific football coach at Trinity High, was showing some new students around and a couple employees. And they couldn't have been greater. There was an air of, I don't want to say simplicity, maybe an air of authenticity and excitement to be here. It was really the chance encounter with a couple of the employees and with some players coming in was nice. They're really good people, and you like to write about good people, and I know fans like to root for good people. And believe me, the Dom DeLucas of the world, you don't get better people than that as well. So
it all feels very genuine from afar. From what you've heard from within the Lash Building, what's that blending and assimilation process been like between the Iowa State people and the existing Penn State people, not to mention transfers from plenty of different schools? This is a first for Penn State, because under James Franklin, the vast majority was these are Penn Staters, and then we add a handful of human beings here and there, whether it be coaches or players. This is vastly different.
Greg Pickle did a really nice piece today on 3 Blue White Illustrated, looking at the core 60 staffers. 28 of them came directly from Iowa State, and at least a half dozen more were at Iowa State previously. And you're right, it's a great observation, Tom, is when O'Brien especially, when Franklin, they brought in their coaching staff, but most of the staffers, most of the core peoples, Franklin brought along Kevin Throckhill, super guy, brought along Andy Frank, brought along Jamel Griffin, but only a handful of people. The behind the scenes people, from the athletic trainer to now head of social media for football to head of nutrition, they all came from Iowa State. I don't think they're in all of Penn State, but one of the best lines I heard is State College's aims on steroids. And it is. So I think they blended well. And then I think maintaining, keeping a Jordan Hill, keeping Trace McSorley, drop Lucas, Jevin Stone. I saw Jevin Stone. He's had a video. Jevin is a gold standard for video, coaches, films, cut-ups, things like that. He goes all the way back to Joe, and he's excited. So all the folks I just mentioned, there's a Midas. Like, they're super quality Penn Staters, so they're a good representative of the folks that have stayed. Long answer here, but I think Iowa State, by all indications, I had a prominent varsity athlete in a non-football basketball sport. She told me that her interactions with the new football players have been fabulous. She's a huge fan. She's a huge fan of the players that have come in, and I put great credence into her endorsement.
I was especially encouraged by the retention of Dan Connor, Trace McSorley.
I miss Dan, yeah.
I'm really excited to see what they do, because it sounded like they were growing and developing as coaches, and Trace was just beginning his experience as an analyst last year, really. And Dan Connor had a handful of seasons under his belt. So to see them retained, and for Matt Campbell to identify quickly, like, yeah, these are guys that are going to be true to Penn State, help with the development process, and also be good coaches, that was very encouraging. One thing I think kind of has been forgotten about, that I don't think we should forget about, is Pat Kraft's role in this entire situation. I was very critical of the hiring process going on for 50 plus days, and then getting Matt Campbell was fantastic. But at the same time, it was also this sense of relief of, well, what in the world was that whole process? And listen, there's been a ton with athletics going on recently. Obviously, the Beaver Stadium hockey game, Penn State, Michigan State, was fantastic. A lot to build on for the future. Dealing with the wrestling program, which again is having tremendous success. Basketball's in full swing. Pat Kraft has plenty to deal with. But I don't want to forget about his role in what's happening with football on a day-to-day basis and what's ahead of him. So from what you've heard and what your impression is, how is Pat Kraft absorbing all of this? What's his position at this point in time?
I think that's a great question. It's insight. And it's been interesting is that as much as Pat's on the sideline during football games, and, they were at an indoor hockey game with Pat, but, I think this is a nuance, but it's a good nuance, is Campbell's dropped the puck. Campbell went to center mat at the Jordan Center for wrestling. Campbell went down to Harrisburg and met with a bunch of donors. I like this tidbit. Campbell has had Zoom calls with Penn State football lettermen by decade, which is, I love that. I think that's, that's not lip service. So Pat's role, I think, and I'd like to think that his hand is behind a lot of this. Pat has let Campbell go literally center stage, and let Campbell, it's not his strength, and it wasn't what they made him do at Iowa State. He had one media availability a week. That's not going to work here at Penn State. But I think Pat he came around to a great hire, and I think that he's let Matt Campbell literally speak for himself, and sometimes words speak as loud as action. But a letterman was on one of those calls, a multi-year starter letterman, who, sometimes looks at the program with a critical eye and was blown away and was, not only by the fact of what he said, but that he did it decade by decade. I think that was, and so Letterman didn't stop in 2014. He went back decades.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Yeah, that was something that lapsed under James Franklin, to put it mildly, and you can understand coming off of the Sandusky scandal that James Franklin was attempting to repair the image of Penn State, the image of Penn State football, as was the entire university for that matter. So you can understand that initial desire to create separation, but what I observed is that slowly over time, there was James Franklin's Penn State, and then it was if there had never been another Penn State when it came to James Franklin's regime. And also there was such a heavy emphasis on these are the players that are going to the NFL Combine, and that time of year is coming around right now. And these are the guys that are going into the draft, and these are the guys that are doing well in the National Football League. And, oh, look at James is going to somebody's house because they got drafted. And that's all well and good, and you love to see those connections. But it felt like the emphasis at times was not on the productivity at Penn State and the productivity at another level. And that's the thing that I'm observing, at least of the team that has been assembled on paper, because we have no idea what this team is actually going to look like in 2026.
Very true.
It feels like this roster is not loaded with guys where we think they're going to play in the NFL. It's we think they're going to be productive at Penn State in 2026. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think all that's very insightful. I think you're right, and I like the way you wrapped up. Is that, yeah, it's hard to think, 8-4 to 10-2. I just was talking with someone who's who works in football, and those are the parameters that person gave. But the emphasis is on what are you going to do in the field, not what you're going to do in the combine, and it is. And I think that's the Iowa State mentality. You had to produce because you were not, Brock Purdy aside, and a couple of really good wide receivers, right? Too bad about Pauly leaving. That you want to produce on the field. Can I share one of my Iowa State nice stories?
Oh, please.
I was dropping something off at Lash. In fact, when I met Campbell, I asked him to come to teach a sports class, and he said he would. So I was dropping up some follow-up information. And hopefully he'll still come to class. And I went in, and it was there wasn't 3 layers of guards keeping me from getting inside the kingdom. I mean, I've been going into that building since, decades. Anyway, so there were not a lot of gatekeeping, and I'm there, and this guy comes out. It turns out he's Hoosier, the GM, and I got to tell you, he doesn't know who I am, but he couldn't have been nicer. We had a 10-minute conversation about me and about him and the welcome that I got. I just showed up, and I was just so impressed that there weren't 6 guards at the palace doors, and I was just treated as a regular Joe. And so that's my personal interaction story, and I felt really good about that. Not me personally, but the person that was representing Penn State football and how they did it.
It's the one thing I've heard from pro coaches and players for a long time is that your locker or your office, your temporary. You're passing through. This isn't forever. So to hear guys that are there and understand those that came before them, whether it be Letterman or coaches or even members of the media, it's like, yeah, I've seen this building when it was cinder blocks or something like that. So it's showing respect, I think, for that tradition and legacy. It's been really impressive to see. You mentioned the schedule, and I'm not about to jump to wins and losses because I'm very much of the mind that the Indiana story, I think, has completely changed the way we need to look at college football. The portal changed the way that we look at college football. Same with NIL. And the perfect example, on Penn State's schedule, Penn State is going to go to Northwestern to open up their brand new facility, Ryan Field, which is
on a Friday night.
Right, on a Friday night, which is sacrilege for Penn State football. I understand that. But they're opening their stadium. They want to have a big-time opponent. Penn State's a big-time brand. I understand it. You can't look at Northwestern football the same way that you, Mike Poorman, have observed Northwestern football for decades. And case in point, the offensive coordinator is freaking Chip Kelly. The quarterback is former 5-star, former Michigan State quarterback, Aiden Childs, who's a hell of an athlete, still has a lot to figure out at quarterback. It's not your grandfather's Northwestern. Whether they'll all of a sudden bow up and win 1 billion games, I have no idea. They could be atrocious again this upcoming season. But my point being, looking at the scheduling within the Big Ten, it's very difficult for me to look at a brand and make an assumption. And you followed all of these teams for decades now. So what's your vantage point?
No, I think, yeah. And then you throw in the new stadium, Cowan, right by the water. I think that's a great example, Tom. I think the other shining example, what you're talking about, is Michigan, right? Everyone turned 180 degrees with that hire. It's like you went from, this could very well be a win. No, I think, I think you're right. It's like, what is the trip to Washington going to be like? Yeah. Although, the basketball team won there the other day. So
that was good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good win. No, you're right. In a sense, so it's bad to say 8-4, 10-2. You're really not going to know. No, you're not going to know how you travel from State College. I don't think you're going to hear any bitching about the airport, but you're not going to hear, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point to pick the record and what it's going to be. It's all, Luke Fickell could finally find magic. You never know.
I always look at like PJ Fleck wins games for Minnesota, period. Washington, Malik Washington, that is the quarterback at Maryland, had a great rookie campaign. Is that something they could build on? Like, these rosters change so much, and Penn State is the poster child for that. Literally, you don't know how this is going to look. So I'm not about to be jumping to all of these conclusions. And I just think the Big Ten has never been more competitive. And I think it's maybe never been deeper. And you would know better than I, having covered the league for probably longer than I've been alive at this point.
No, I think I do know this is the Matt Campbell's team will show up. They'll be fundamentally sound. They'll be ready to play. So, and they're in every game. And honestly, this is, I don't hate to say it this way, but this is a bridge year. It's like 2027, the stadium opens. That's nuts. Syracuse, the season opener. So yeah, to sit here on February 12th and pick a record, not having seen them, and Rocco's not going to. We're not going to see him throw a pass in Beaver Stadium till the season opener, right? We're not. I mean, he's going to, but we're not going to see it.
Yeah, we still have yet to. I don't know if you've heard anything about the blue-white game at this point. We were told maybe we'd hear something this week, but Rocco Becht had off-season surgery on his non-throwing shoulder, but still like getting healthy and getting ready for this upcoming season. That's going to take a little while and take some time to understand this team. Before I let you go, I mentioned, I didn't want to forget about Pat Kraft in this, and I'm biased because of my relationship with Justin King on this show. I don't want to forget about Terry Smith and all this. How has Terry Smith handled this transition? And from your observation, how much has his job changed, or how much has it stayed the same?
A couple things. Great question. I think when we say authentic and genuine, like he's the OG, right? Yeah. So I think he had a comment last week. I was not there when he said it, but about how he feels like he's associate head coach, not just in title, but in deed. And so his brain is being picked, his voice is being heard. And I think we've shown that's really critical. We've shown that what that means behind the scenes in the locker room. I think we've seen what it means being honest with your players. I think it means how you do things on the field. So that's been great. And it's been interesting that he said that. So he is going to have more of a voice, which is great. But there's two things that I think that are cool is I think it might be Western PA. Terry's being inducted to I don't think it's Whitfield.
CA, if I have that acronym correct.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame. And then he's the featured guy for adaptive athletes at Penn State, which is they've reinstated that. Sue Paterno's big behind that. Last year, Mike Reed came back and played for that. But Terry's the guy for that this year. And so it's those things that he's being listened to by Matt Campbell. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Penn State has this big new program with a featured speaker and honoree. It's Terry Smith. So it's kind of cool. He's getting his due, and he deserves his due. So kudos to you for bringing it up. But Terry's the real deal. And so, and he always has been. I remember there was a thing in the off season where you could go from head coach to head coach. I mean, from head coach to assistant. And I waited to the very end just to get Terry one-on-one. And I go, I waited out everybody because I knew when I talked to you, I was going to get the truth. And boy, that I don't want to say that's his epitaph, but that's his MO.
That's what James Franklin said about him all the time, was he's the truth teller within the program. So I'm glad to hear that that's continued. Mike, thank you for continuing to support us here on State of State. Appreciate it. Check out Mike Poorman's works on statecollege.com. And if you're an aspiring Penn State student or an existing Penn State student, just sign up for a Mike Poorman class. It doesn't matter what it is. I took Mike Poorman's classes once upon a time, and I turned out halfway decent.
You were a great student. I remember where you sat. I'm pointing. You sat right over there.
Yeah. My vision was not great. So I was like, I'd like to be close. And then I've gotten older. My hearing's getting worse. So I'd probably be sitting like on your hip at this point.
You haven't aged in a decade, Tom Hannifan.
Very kind of you. He is Mike Poorman. I'm Tom Hannifan. Thank you for joining us here on State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel for just 99 cents a month. You can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.